Zyra's breath caught in her throat as she saw her father, Emperor Korvax, the ruler of the Zorani Empire, kneeling in chains. His once proud golden robes were torn, his crown missing. His face, aged by war and time, was calm, but his eyes held shame and sadness. Eric's grip on his stolen rifle tightened as he scanned the room. The warlords stood like hunters, their sharp armor reflecting the dim light of the throne chamber. At their center, Jork smirked, standing just behind the fallen emperor. "I told you, princess," Jork said smoothly. "You were too late." Zara took a step forward, rage burning in her chest. "You betrayed him. You betrayed the Empire." Jork chuckled. "Betrayal? No, this is evolution. Your father's weakness doomed us. He refused to act. The warlords and I, we will make Zoran strong again." Eric aimed his rifle. "You mean you'll start a war? Against humanity? Against the galaxy?" Jork shrugged. "Wars are won by those willing to do what is necessary." His yellow eyes gleamed. "And now, princess, I offer you a choice. Kneel beside your father, or die with him." The warlords raised their weapons. Zyra's hands clenched into fists. She could feel the weight of the moment. The fate of her people, her father, her very life, all hanging on this one decision. Eric took a step closer, his voice low. "If we kneel, they'll kill us anyway." Zyra nodded slightly. She had to fight. Without warning, she moved like lightning, grabbing a fallen guard's dagger and hurling it straight at Jork. The blade slashed across his face, making him roar in pain. Eric opened fire, blasting the nearest warlord. The chamber erupted into chaos as the warlords fired back, energy blasts streaking across the golden halls. Zyra rushed to her father, slicing his chains with a stolen blade. "Father, can you fight?" she asked desperately. The Emperor staggered, but his old eyes blazed with defiance. "I can stand." Eric threw him a fallen guard's rifle. "Then let's finish this." The Emperor nodded, gripping the weapon with surprising strength. Jork, blood dripping from his cheek, snarled, "Kill them all." The warlords charged, their armor gleaming. Eric and Zyra stood side by side, weapons ready. The Emperor raised his rifle and spoke with the booming voice of a ruler. "No, this throne belongs to me." The battle for the Empire had begun. Commander Eric Voss felt the sharp jolt as his fighter ship took a direct hit. Alarms blared, warning him of critical damage. His hands gripped the controls tightly, but the ship was barely responding. Sparks flew from the dashboard, and thick smoke filled the cockpit. "Come on, hold together," he muttered, trying to stabilize the ship. It was a losing battle. The enemy attack had come out of nowhere. He had been on a routine patrol near an uncharted sector when an unknown alien fleet engaged him without warning. His squad was scattered, communications were jammed, and now he was plummeting toward a planet below. Through the cracked windshield, he saw the massive green surface rushing toward him. The gravity pulled him down fast. With one last desperate move, he activated the emergency crash system. The ship's thrusters fired in bursts, slowing his descent just enough to avoid instant death. Then, with a deafening impact, his fighter smashed into the ground. Everything went black. When Eric opened his eyes, pain shot through his body. His head was pounding, his ribs ached, and his leg was trapped under debris. The cockpit glass was shattered, and the control panel was dead. His suit's oxygen supply was holding, but not for long. He had to get out. With a grunt of effort, he pushed the wreckage off his leg and crawled out of the ruined ship. The air outside was thick and warm, filled with the scent of alien vegetation. Towering trees with glowing blue leaves surrounded him. Strange insect-like creatures buzzed around, their eyes glowing in the dim light. Eric activated his distress beacon, but he knew the chances of rescue were slim. His ship was deep in unknown space, far from any human-controlled territory. Then he heard something move. His hand shot to his sidearm as a shadow emerged from the trees. The figure was tall, slender, and wearing silver armor with intricate golden patterns. Her face was partially covered by a royal-looking mask, but her violet eyes shone through, filled with curiosity. An alien woman. She stepped closer, her flowing robes moving like liquid metal. Eric tensed, expecting hostility. Instead, she spoke in a calm, melodic voice. "You are human." Eric was too exhausted to be surprised. If she knew what he was, she had encountered his kind before. "Yeah," he said, struggling to stay upright. "Who are you?" She tilted her head slightly before replying. "I am Princess Zyra of the Zorani Empire," she said, "and I just saved your life." Eric blinked. He hadn't even noticed that his wounds had stopped bleeding. She must have used some kind of advanced medical technology. Before he could thank her, Zyra's gaze turned serious. "But I need something in return," she said. "A request only you can fulfill." Eric frowned. He had a bad feeling about this. Zyra's ship limped through space, engines barely holding together after the intense chase. The asteroid field was now far behind them. But the real challenge lay ahead. The Zorani Imperial Palace. Eric checked his weapons. He had a sidearm, but against an entire empire, it wasn't much. "Are you sure we can just land there? Your father's palace isn't exactly open to visitors." Zyra smirked. "I am a princess. They won't shoot me." Then her smirk faded. "But they might arrest me." Eric frowned. "Great. That's comforting." The massive planet of Zoran Prime loomed ahead, its surface covered in shimmering golden cities. The Imperial Palace, a vast floating fortress, hovered in the planet's upper atmosphere. Its towering spires stretched into space, surrounded by dozens of warships. As they approached, a deep voice crackled over the comms. "Unidentified vessel, state your purpose." Zyra leaned forward. "This is Princess Zyra of House Korvax. I request an audience with the Emperor." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, sharper this time. "Princess Zyra, you are ordered to power down your ship and prepare to be escorted. Any attempt to resist will be seen as an act of treason." Eric muttered, "Yeah, this is going well." Zyra sighed and powered down the ship. Within moments, 2 massive guard ships flanked them, guiding them into a landing bay within the palace. As soon as they touched down, dozens of armored soldiers surrounded the ship, their weapons drawn. Eric clenched his fists. "I don't like this." Zyra exhaled. "Neither do I. But we have no choice." The ship's doors hissed open, and Zyra stepped out first, her royal armor gleaming. Eric followed, keeping his hands raised. No sudden moves. From the crowd of soldiers, a tall Zorani officer stepped forward. His crimson armor marked him as a high-ranking commander. His piercing yellow eyes locked onto Zyra. "Princess," he said coldly, "you were not expected to return." Zyra lifted her chin. "Commander Jorek, I demand to see my father." Jorek's lips curled. "The Emperor is not seeing visitors. He is occupied." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "Occupied with what?" Jorek smirked, preparing for his own downfall. Eric stiffened. He didn't like the way this guy talked. Zyra took a step forward. "I know about the warlord's plan. They will strike soon. If my father does not act now, the Empire will fall into their hands." Jorek chuckled. "You think your father doesn't know? He refuses to act. He is weak, and because of that, he took a step closer, lowering his voice. The warlords already have control." Zyra's face darkened. "What are you saying?" Jorek's smirk grew wider. "I'm saying, you're too late." Eric's pulse quickened. Something was very wrong. And then, the soldiers raised their weapons. Eric stared at the hologram in front of him. Massive warships floated over the Zorani capital like silent predators. Troops marched in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the artificial lights of the grand city. But Eric's eyes were drawn to one figure, a general in blood-red armor, standing on a raised platform. addressing thousands of soldiers. His voice, though alien, carried a tone Eric had heard before, the voice of a warlord preparing for conquest. "These are the men who will seize power if my father falls into their hands," Kyra said, her tone sharp. "They have no love for diplomacy. Their only goal is expansion, and humanity is in their path." Eric clenched his fists. This wasn't just a political struggle. It was a war waiting to happen. But that didn't mean he could accept Kyra's request. "I get it," Eric said. "These guys are bad news, but you're asking me to kill your father to stop them. That doesn't sound like a solution. It sounds like a coup." Kyra's violet eyes narrowed. "If you have a better option, tell me." Eric remained silent. He was a soldier, not a kingmaker. He had fought wars, defended his people, and risked his life for duty. But this was something else. "You said your father is the only thing keeping these warlords from taking over," Eric said. "So why not stand with him?" Kyra exhaled slowly. "Because he is weak," she admitted. "He believes in peace, but peace cannot exist when enemies are at our gates. He refuses to act, even as his empire crumbles beneath him." She turned away, staring out into the vastness of space. "I love my father, but his time is over. If I don't act now, we will all fall." Eric ran a hand through his messy hair. "And what happens after he's gone? The empire won't just accept you as ruler." "They will if I take control before the warlords do," she said. "But I need a symbol, an act that proves I am strong enough to lead." She looked at him again, her voice softer. "That is why I need you, Eric." Eric let out a slow breath. She wasn't asking for help. She was asking for a murderer. "I'm not an assassin," Eric said. "I won't do it." Kyra studied him for a moment. Then, instead of arguing, she simply nodded. "I thought you might say that." She pressed a button on the console. The hologram changed, now showing something else. Eric's blood ran cold. It was a Terran colony, one of humanity's outermost settlements. The footage was grainy, but it was clear. Zorani warships were already on the move. "The generals won't wait much longer," Kyra said. "If they strike first, your people will have no warning. You don't have to help me. But if you walk away, Earth might not survive what's coming." Eric's heart pounded. He was out of time. Eric felt his stomach twist as he stared at the hologram. The Terran colony in the image looked peaceful, unaware of the warships lurking just beyond their skies. If Kyra was telling the truth, the Zorani warlords were preparing to strike first, and humanity wouldn't even see it coming. He took a slow breath, trying to think clearly. "You're telling me that if I don't kill your father, these warlords will take control and wipe out humanity?" he asked. Kyra nodded. "It's only a matter of time." Eric rubbed his temples. Damn it, this is insane. He had spent his entire career fighting for honor, duty, and survival. He had killed in battle, but that was different. This was murder, a cold and calculated act. He couldn't just agree to it. But if he refused, millions of innocent lives could be lost. Kyra watched him, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I know this isn't easy, but you are not just a soldier, you are a survivor. You understand war." Eric let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I understand war, and I know one thing. There are always other ways." Kyra's eyes flickered with something. Hope? Doubt? He couldn't tell. "You said your father is weak," Eric continued. "But does he know about the warlord's plan?" She hesitated. "He knows they want power, but he refuses to believe they will act so aggressively." Eric leaned forward. "Then what if we convince him?" Kyra frowned. "You mean, make him fight back?" Eric nodded. "If he sees the real threat, maybe he'll finally take action. Maybe we don't need to kill him. We just need to push him in the right direction." Kyra's expression darkened. You don't know my father. He is not a warrior. Eric smirked. Neither am I, but I still fight when I have to. Zyra remained silent, clearly torn. Then the ship's alarms blared. A red light flashed on the console, and Zyra's hands flew to the controls. We have company, she muttered. Eric turned to the view screen and felt his heart drop. 2 Zorani warships were closing in fast. Did they track us? Eric asked. Zyra's jaw tightened. They must have detected our launch. They don't know you're here, but they will once they scan the ship. Eric checked his sidearm. It wasn't much against warships, but he had a bad feeling this was going to get messy. Zyra's hands danced over the controls. Hold on. The ship suddenly jerked forward, engines roaring as she accelerated toward open space. The enemy warships followed. Eric gritted his teeth as the ship shook from incoming fire. Guess we're doing this the hard way, he muttered. Zyra's eyes burned with determination. Yes, she said. The hard way. The ship shook violently as enemy fire slammed into its shields. Eric gripped the seat's edge, his heart pounding. Please tell me you have weapons on this thing, he shouted. Zyra's hands moved quickly over the controls. Of course, but this is a royal transport, not a warship. We won't blast in a fight. Eric glanced at the view screen. The 2 Zorani warships were right behind them, their sleek black forms cutting through space like hunters chasing prey. Bright energy blasts shot past them, missing by inches. How long until we jump to hyperspace? He asked. Zyra's expression darkened. They hit our drive. We need time to repair it. Eric cursed under his breath. Then we need another plan. Zyra's fingers danced across the controls, and suddenly the ship spun sharply, diving toward a massive asteroid field ahead. Whoa, wait, you're flying into that? Eric asked in disbelief. Zyra smirked. They are bigger. We are faster. Let's see if they can keep up. Eric had no time to argue as the ship raced into the asteroid field, dodging massive spinning rocks that could crush them in an instant. The enemy warships followed, firing wildly, but their larger size made it harder to maneuver. Eric watched as one of the warships tried to turn too fast and clipped a massive asteroid. The impact sent the ship spiraling, smashing into another floating rock before exploding in a brilliant fireball. One down, Zyra muttered. Eric exhaled. Damn, that actually worked. The second warship, however, was still in pursuit. It fired again, and this time, the blast hit their engines directly. The ship lurched and warning alarms blared. Smoke filled the cockpit as sparks flew from the control panels. We're hit, Zyra shouted, struggling to keep control. Eric grabbed his seat, trying to stay upright as the ship spun out of control, heading toward a massive asteroid ahead. Do something, he yelled. Zyra gritted her teeth, pulling hard on the controls. At the last second, she managed to level the ship, skimming just above the asteroid's surface. But the enemy warship was still behind them. We won't survive another hit, Zyra said. Eric's mind raced. Then an idea hit him. What if we use the asteroid? He said. Zyra glanced at him. Explain. Eric pointed to a narrow canyon on the asteroid's surface. If we fly through there, they'll have to follow. And if they do, Zyra's eyes widened as she understood. We can collapse the canyon on them. Without hesitation, she geared the ship downward, diving straight into the tight canyon. The enemy warship followed, squeezing into the rocky passage at dangerous speeds. Eric grabbed the weapon's controls. Tell me we have something to fire. Zyra nodded. Missile launchers, low yield. That'll do, Eric said, locking onto the weak points of the canyon walls. He fired. The missiles struck the rock, and with a deep rumble, the canyon collapsed just as the enemy warship reached the middle. The massive ship tried to pull up, but it was too late. Tons of rock crashed down, smashing into the warship and burying it completely. Eric let out a slow breath. That was close. Zyra checked the controls. Engines are still weak, but I think we can get out of here. Eric looked at her. Then let's go. We still have an emperor to convince. Zyra nodded. Agreed. But after this, he better listen. The ship turned and sped away from the battlefield, leaving only silence behind. Eric sat back in his seat, breathing heavily. His body still ached from the crash, and his heart was pounding after the close encounter with the monstrous beast. The alien ship hummed as it lifted off, soaring through the misty atmosphere of the strange planet. Across from him, Princess Styra controlled the ship with effortless grace. Her glowing violet eyes focused on the holographic displays in front of her. The sleek, golden controls responded to her slightest touch. Eric watched her for a moment, still trying to process everything. He had been shot down, saved by an alien princess, and nearly eaten by a massive monster, all within a few hours. And now she claimed she needed his help. "All right," he said, breaking the silence. "You saved my life. I owe you. But what exactly do you want from me?" Zyra didn't answer immediately. She turned her gaze toward him, her expression unreadable. Then, in a calm, steady voice, she said something that made Eric's blood run cold. "I need you to kill my father." Eric blinked. He was sure he had misheard. "Wait. What?" "My father," Zyra repeated. "The emperor of the Zorani Empire. He must die, and only you can do it." Eric let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You can't be serious." "I am." He shook his head. "That's insane. You're asking me to assassinate an emperor, the ruler of an entire alien empire. I don't even know the guy. Why would I kill him?" Zyra's expression darkened. "Because if you don't, my empire will fall into the hands of those who hate humanity. And when that happens, your people will be the first to die." Eric clenched his jaw. He had seen enough war to know when someone was desperate. And Zyra, despite her calm exterior, was desperate. "You're his daughter," Eric said after a moment. "Why can't you do it yourself?" Zyra looked away. "It is forbidden. Zorani law does not allow a royal heir to spill the blood of their own kin. It is an ancient rule, one that even I cannot break. But an outsider, a human, is not bound by these laws." Eric exhaled, rubbing his face. "And what happens if I say no?" Zyra's gaze was cold. "Then my father will soon be overthrown by a faction of warlords who see your species as a threat. They will wipe out humanity before you even know what's happening." Eric felt a chill run down his spine. She wasn't lying. He could see it in her eyes. "I don't kill people for politics," Eric said finally. "I'm a soldier, not an assassin." Zyra studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I thought you might say that." She pressed a button on the console, and a hologram appeared in front of them. It was a live feed of the Zorani capital. Massive warships hovered above the city. Soldiers marched in formation. And in the center, a terrifying figure, a high-ranking general with blood-red armor, stood before a crowd, speaking in a harsh, commanding voice. "They are already making their move," Zyra said. "If you don't help me, your people will never see the attack coming." Eric stared at the hologram. He had survived many battles. But this was something far bigger. Eric Voss stared at the alien princess, his mind still foggy from the crash. The pain in his body was dull now, but he knew that wasn't natural. She had done something to him. "What do you mean? A request?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Princess Zyra didn't answer immediately. She studied him with her glowing violet eyes, as if deciding whether to trust him. The wind rustled her silver and gold robes, making her look almost unreal. "You are in dangerous territory, human," she finally said. "Your enemies are nearby. If I had not found you first, you would be dead already." Eric glanced around the dense, jungle-like environment. The strange plants, the glowing insects, the eerie silence. It all felt unnatural. He was truly lost in an unknown world. "Thanks for the rescue," he said, still wary. "But what do you want from me?" Sarah took a step closer, her presence commanding. "I need your help," she said. "I saved your life, and in return, I ask for something only you can do." Eric exhaled, shaking his head. "Lady, I'm just a soldier. I don't think I can do much for an alien princess." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You are human," she said, as if that explained everything. Before he could ask what she meant, a sudden roar echoed through the jungle. It was deep and guttural, like something massive had just awakened. The ground trembled slightly. Zyra's expression hardened. "We need to move. Now." She grabbed Eric's arm, surprisingly strong despite her slender frame, and pulled him forward. He limped beside her, his injuries still slowing him down. "What was that?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. "A vrak beast," she answered. "A hunter. It must have smelled your blood." Great, Eric thought, as if today couldn't get any worse. They pushed through thick foliage, moving quickly but cautiously. Zyra seemed to know exactly where she was going. Eric had no choice but to trust her for now. After a few minutes, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a sleek, black and gold alien ship, unlike anything Eric had ever seen. It was elegant and advanced, far beyond human technology. "Your ship?" he asked. Zyra nodded. "It will take us somewhere safe." Before they could board, another roar shook the air, closer this time. The trees behind them cracked as something enormous pushed through. Eric turned, heart pounding. Emerging from the jungle was a massive beast, at least 15 feet tall, covered in dark, armored scales. Its 4 glowing red eyes locked onto Eric, and its jaw opened to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. It lunged. Eric barely had time to react before Zyra raised her hand. A burst of blue energy shot from her palm, slamming into the beast's head. The creature roared in pain, but wasn't dead. It shook itself and charged again. "Get inside," Zyra shouted. Eric didn't argue. He sprinted toward the ship, diving in just as Zyra followed. The doors sealed behind them, and the engines roared to life. Outside, the beast slammed into the hull, but the ship held strong. Eric collapsed into a seat, breathing hard. That thing was huge. Zyra took the pilot's seat and began lifting off. "It was nothing," she said. "You will face far worse soon enough." Eric looked at her, uneasy. What exactly did I just get myself into? Zyra's expression was unreadable. "You'll see soon enough, human." Eric's instincts screamed danger as the soldiers aimed their weapons. This was a trap. Zyra's hands curled into fists. "Jorik, you dare threaten me? I am the rightful heir to the Empire." Jorik laughed coldly. "And heir? No, princess. You are a relic of a dying rule. The warlords have already decided your father's fate. Soon, the Empire will belong to those strong enough to take it." Eric's hand inched toward his sidearm. He might not survive a firefight, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. Zyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "If my father is still alive, I demand to see him. Now." Jorik's smirk deepened. "Oh, you will see him, but you won't like what you find." He turned to the guards. "Take them." The soldiers rushed forward. Eric moved fast, too fast for them. He grabbed the closest guard's rifle, yanking it away before slamming his fist into the alien's face. The soldier staggered back, but there were too many of them. Another soldier lunged, and Eric barely dodged, using the stolen rifle to knock him out cold. Zyra wasn't idle either. She spun, kicking one soldier in the chest, sending him crashing into another. Then she grabbed a fallen blaster and opened fire. The landing bay erupted into chaos. Eric fired a shot at the lights above, shattering them, plunging half the room into darkness. "We need to move," he shouted. Zyra nodded, and they raced toward the exit as alarms blared through the palace. More guards poured into the hallways, forcing them to retreat into a side passage. "We can't fight the whole palace," Eric said, breathing hard. "Where's your father?" Zyra's face was grim. "The throne room. If he's still alive, he'll be there." Eric nodded. "Then let's move." They weaved through the palace corridors, avoiding patrols. But time was running out. If Jorik wasn't lying, the Emperor was already losing control. They reached the massive golden doors of the throne room. 2 heavily armed guards stood outside. Zyra took a deep breath. "We do this fast." Eric smirked. "Fast is my style." They charge. Zyra moved like a blur, disarming one guard in seconds. Eric tackled the other, slamming him against the wall before knocking him unconscious. With the guards down, Zyra pressed her hand to the scanner. The door slid open, revealing the throne room. Eric froze. At the center of the room, the Emperor knelt in chains. Behind him stood Jorik, and next to him, a group of warlords in battle armor. Jorik smiled darkly. "You made it, Princess, just in time to watch your father fall." Eric gritted his teeth. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was a coup.